Hello, and thanks for joining me. Today I want to talk about something which I'm sure everybody watching this is familiar with and will have come across at some point, and that is those people who criticise other people's choice of motorcycle. Those people who slag off other people's bikes. If you have spent any time at all on social media forums or at bike meets, then I'm sure you are familiar with the kind of sniping and bitching and slagging off that goes on of other people's bikes. And as I've got older and hopefully a little bit wiser, I've sort of formulated a few what you might call principles to live by. I'm sure we all do this, and one of them is to never criticise another person's choice of motorcycle. Why not? Well, I think that there's a number of reasons. I mean, it's self-evident, but I just want to unpack the reasons. One is that if you criticise somebody else's choice of bike, then you are being very offensive towards them. For most of us, our bike is our pride and joy. And so if you slag off somebody else's pride of joy, then, well, frankly, it just makes you an arsehole. Why would you purposefully go around upsetting other people and criticising them for no good reason? I think at very best you can say it makes you an arsehole, and at worst possibly, a sociopath or possibly even a psychopath if you're getting pleasure out of it. But my second point, and this leads on to something important that I'm going to talk about in more detail in a moment, and that is that those people who tend to slag off other people's bikes, usually do so within the context of maintaining that their bike is better than yours. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of such behaviour, you'll appreciate that it's really not a good approach to making friends and influencing people, as Dale Carnegie would say. If you analyse such behaviour from a psychological perspective, then it's really just a poor, vulnerable, insecure ego crying out on the part of the person making such criticism. Anybody who needs to big themselves up by putting others down is basically insecure. And within the context of what I'm talking about, if people need to justify their own choice of motorcycle by criticising other people's choice of motorcycle, makes them feel better about their choice of motorcycle. Why do they need to do that? Well, there must be some insecurity in their decision and their choice that underlies such behaviour. Having seen this kind of behaviour extensively over a long period of time and having been subject to it on occasions, I just want to analyse it in a little bit more detail, because I think it manifests in two main ways. One is in terms of the cost of the motorcycle, and the others in terms of the performance, the power of the motorcycle. So let's just have a look at these two, because it's interesting. So the first is, basically say, my bike's better than yours because it's more expensive, it costs more. The main culprits for this tend to be Harley riders, but I hasten to say that not all Harley riders are like that, not by a long shot. I know many Harley riders who are not like that, and also I have to say that such behaviour is not just limited to Harley riders. You see similar kind of behaviour from people who have bought expensive bikes of any brand, and they tend to look down on people with cheaper bikes. They regard themselves as being superior, or at least they try and convince themselves that they are superior because they have that more expensive bike. And of course there's a reverse side to this, which you might call the sort of reverse snobbery of bike price, and that's the people who slag off Harley riders because they ride expensive flash bikes. They point to their $500 rat bike and brag that they can outride any Harley rider on that. It's the, what I call the chrome won't get you home mentality. And so, the Harley snobs and the, what you might call the rat bike snobs, they're really just two sides of the same coin. And they're both guilty of the same behaviour, really. So the second manifestation of this kind of behaviour that I see relates to the power and performance of the bikes. Now, admittedly, these two aspects of price and performance are often interrelated, as typically a more expensive bike has better performance, better specs. But that's not always the case, and the prime example, of course, is Harley Davidson's. And so, they are actually two separate issues, really. So this second aspect is that I'm referring to is the kind of mentality of my bike is more powerful than yours. My bike's bigger, more powerful, better than yours, and it comes in various different manifestations. Quite often, it's not quite so blatant, but it's got that kind of sort of schoolyard type bragging at its core. And in the schoolyard and children, that's a natural part of children growing up and finding, exploring their self-identity. But in adults, it's quite pitiful behaviour, really, and sadly, we see it all the time. Anybody who rides a modern classic bike has probably been at the receiving end of this kind of behaviour and this kind of taunting. Why do you ride that overweight, underpowered piece of junk? My bike's twice as powerful as yours, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of mentality that I'm on about. And the people who make those types of comments, as well as revealing their own insecurities, also show a marked lack of awareness about why we ride, about why people choose the bikes that they ride. They seem to be blinkered just to, it's that kind of, I can't see any perspective other than my own, which many people are guilty of. And so let's have a look at that question of why we ride, because I think it's an important underpinning of this point that I'm trying to make. If you ride a motorcycle, you do so either as an essential means of transport, i.e., for example, commuting to work on it, or you ride it for pleasure. And of course, it might be a combination of both of those. So the bike that you choose to ride will be the one that is right for that job. So if you ride to commute, you want to pick a practical bike for that commute, depending on how far that commute is and what kind of distance. If it's a relatively short local commute through heavy traffic, there is no need for a big, powerful bike. And most people who commute on the bikes don't really want to be spending vast amounts of money, because the decision to commute on a motorcycle is usually an economic one. So people who commute on the bikes typically ride smaller, cheaper, lower power bikes, because that is the right choice for them for that particular usage. But those people who ride their bikes for pleasure will choose a bike that best fits their needs and their style of riding, the type of pleasure riding that they do. And again, that's not necessarily going to be the most expensive or highest performance bike. One of the things that I really love about motorcycling is that it is a very broad church. Bikers are not one homogeneous group. We're very varied, and our interests, our tastes, and our motorcycling activities all differ as well. This means that what you consider to be your ideal bike, your dream bike, will depend on many factors. And it's not just about I want the biggest best bike out there. There are many factors, such as the culture that you are in, your social background, your age, your other interests, and indeed your riding history as well. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean from people I know, just to illustrate this point, because it is very important. So I've got one friend who I'm not quite sure how old he is now, but I know that he didn't start riding a bike until he was over 50. And he went straight onto Harley Davidson. So he did his test, went on a course, did his test, got his license, and then just went out and bought a big Harley Davidson. So until he was in his early 50s, he'd never ridden a bike before. And I guess, that's typical of quite a few Harley riders. But in his case, it was his dream bike from a childhood. But he'd never had the chance to ride before that. He always put family first, both in terms of his time and his money. But then as his kids grown up and left home and got their own families and he paid off the mortgage, he found himself with the time and the financial means to go out and buy a bike, and it had to be a Harley Davidson because that had always been his dream bike. Good luck to him. I've got another friend who is in his early 70s now, and he rides a modern BSA Gold Star. So he's one of the people who, typically gets accused of, overweight, underpowered, what have you. But he's been a bike rider his whole life, and he was a racer when he's younger. Very, very competent motorcyclist, very competent mechanic. But as he's got older, he's accepted that he's not as physically able as he was when he was younger, and he wants a bike that is easier to ride, lighter clutch, just easier riding, generally better brakes, easier maintenance, more reliable, and importantly for him, an electric start. And he doesn't need a lot of power for the kind of riding he does. And so the BSA is a great bike for him because it's in this kind of style of bikes that he grew up with. He feels very comfortable with that. It's got that kind of nostalgic value, and he really enjoys riding it. I've got another friend who's in his early mid-40s, I think, and he rides a big BMW GS, and he's typical of the kind of rider who changes his bike every 2 years at the most on PCP. So he gets all his bikes on PCP, and he always has the best, latest, flashiest bike with all the gadgets, despite the fact that he only ever gets away on a tour, so for one sort of 2-week holiday a year, and the rest of the year he's one of those typical cliched hanging around outside Starbucks with his GS type rider. But that's where he gets his pleasure, from owning that bike. And he's got his own business, he works very hard, and it's part of rewarding himself. Having the latest best bike is part of him rewarding himself for that. I've got another friend who's in his early 50s now, and he rides a Hayabusa, and he's always had high-power sports bikes, and he's always been a fast rider, and he loves doing track days, and so that's the bike that fits him. I could go on, but my point is that each person that I've mentioned above rides the bike that they love, and it's the right bike for them. And motorcycling is a passion. We're all very passionate about our bikes, passionate about what we do, and we choose a bike that best fits that passion. Therefore, I will never criticise another rider's choice of bike, because they have chosen the right bike for them. And the fact that it's maybe not the right bike for me or the right bike for you is irrelevant to them. Okay. Thanks a lot for listening. Hopefully see you again soon. Bye.